Welcome back to our weekly speaker series. For those of you that are new and joining us, weekly speaker series is something we do every Thursday around this time, where we bring in special guests, we bring in other hosts, we talk about different games, specific things in the game industry, even workshops. We do like a bunch of different things. And this week we actually will be covering just best practices for your resumes and portfolios, and when you are, actually looking for a job, and 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 what you should consider when you are like applying for a role, either contract or freelance. And today we have Angel Miranda with us. He's a talent
Hello,
sourcer.
hello.
He's a talent sourcer, and Angel, can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what you do and
Sure.
how you got into the industry?
Of course, of course. Well, first and foremost, super excited to be here. Thank you so much, Corley, for having me. Um, I am a talent sourcer with Activision Publishing. I'm okay with sharing that. And what I do, talent sourcing is within talent acquisition, which is a part of HR. And just to backtrack a bit, the way that I've gotten into the gaming industry, I've been a gamer since I was 5 years old, to be honest with you. So it was always an interest. Always a goal to somehow be involved within the gaming industry to some capacity. And 5 years ago, I got into staffing within an agency. And then 3 years ago, still within an agency, started working within the gaming industry, again, still within staffing, so recruitment. Primarily focusing on design and creative, marketing, project management positions, things of that nature. But overall, always being involved within the gaming industry within the past 3 years. So, that's kind of a breakdown into the transition of how I got into the gaming industry. And what I currently do now is, again, as I mentioned, talent sourcing, which probably is a term that not many people know of, but think of it as a part of recruitment or HR. So, and again, it's a part of talent acquisition, and that's where I'm going to start. So, what is talent acquisition? So, think of talent acquisition as the subdivision of HR that's going to identify candidates for specific positions within companies. And that's usually broken down into recruiters and sourcers. Um, and I'll go into what the difference is there, but these are people that you'll probably be most familiar with, or more than likely, most of you are more familiar with the recruiter title than sourcer. But I'll get into what the difference is there. And I think I'm going to break this down so you know exactly what to expect. This is why I'm bringing up talent acquisition, what to expect, and on our end, on what you may see, right? Um, so what's the difference between the two? So recruiters and sourcers pretty much align within the same position, or have the same end goal, rather, right? To find good talent to fill a particular role. But recruiters will focus primarily on, well, they'll oversee the job postings that a particular company is has available. They'll coordinate with the hiring managers for expectations to get a clarity on what's needed. They'll also go through the applicants themselves that are going onto the websites, whether it be job boards or going to, for instance, my company at Activision.com. And they'll also source candidates, which is actually searching for the candidates themselves via different platforms. Um, and ultimately offering negotiations as well is what recruiters are responsible for. Sourcing standpoint, very similar, just more focused on the candidate side of things. So we'll figure out, this is where I come in, right? So we'll figure out what's needed from a company, what the company is usually hiring for, and find those people. So what that means is I am responsible for finding people to fill hard to fill roles or just bandwidth if the recruiters need assistance, right? And I'm also responsible for pipelining talent, which means even if we don't have a particular role open, I'm reaching out to you just in case something does open up. You're the first in line, right? So that's where I come in. So all in all, we have similar end goals and use similar tools. And I think Corley wanted me to mention this specifically, but LinkedIn, right? So LinkedIn is my primary tool. And I know most people, depending on the region, it varies, right? Some people use LinkedIn more than others. Some people see the use in it, some people don't. But from my perspective, from what I've been exposed to, from what I deal with on a day-to-day basis, is LinkedIn necessary? Absolutely. um, and it's I will say that it's not only because it's a great tool to source, but it also includes 30 million plus job postings and access to hiring managers themselves directly. Um, if you've ever dabbled with it, it is a very social media driven platform, so it's easy to find and communicate with people within those industries. So very useful tool. Um, I think ideally, I know it's, again, as I mentioned, it can be a regional thing on usually location is a big factor in where LinkedIn is used. Given that the gaming industry can primarily be found on the West Coast in the States, a huge presence at least. Um, Highly suggest using that, given that almost everyone within the industry is on LinkedIn to some
Mm-hmm.
capacity, right? So even if it is just setting up a profile and having it present, just so you have a presence online, very important. Full transparency, I've had people hesitate on candidates because of a lack of profile on LinkedIn. So extremely important to have, very useful resource. And I mean, on top of the job boards that you're probably applying to, you can actually communicate with the hiring managers or sourcers like ourselves directly, opposed to applying to a job, which, just to give you perspective of what that looks like on our end, Activision as a whole probably has 3K plus applicants a week easily,
Just a
right?
week.
So just a week. So it, just that bandwidth falling on a certain amount of recruiters and talent sources that we have, it's a lot, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to have that tool to be able to reach out to someone directly and be like, hey, listen, I'm so and so, this is what I do, and I applied to this particular position. Let me know your thoughts or connect me with whomever you think could be a better contact. And some people are more responsive than others, right?
Yeah.
But it's always a good resource to have. Uh, I know for at least on my end, I try to be as responsive as possible. And if I'm not working on something directly, I'll probably send you a super short but super sweet message just saying, "Hey, listen, thank you for showing an interest. I'm not overseeing this, but I just forwarded your information over to whomever is, right?
Yeah.
Good luck." So at least you have that foot in the door. So LinkedIn, for the industry that we're in, that most of you are trying to get in, if you're not already in, super important, super useful, and definitely highly suggested from a recruiting, from a sourcing standpoint, because that is my tool. I'm on LinkedIn from 8 to 5, period. Um, so yeah, that's what I have. Corley, did you have any questions regarding that, or
I
you want
would
me to move on?
maybe ask when you are looking at LinkedIn, like what
Hmm.
specifically would you be looking at? I mean, apart from the fact that the person actually has a LinkedIn, um, what
Sure.
else would you be looking at that kind of like gets your attention? And maybe this is something we can talk a little bit later
Yeah,
regarding
yeah,
resumes
sure.
and stuff, but definitely like
Hmm.
once you go into a LinkedIn, what's the first thing that catches your attention, I would say, of a person's
Um,
profile?
that there's actually information on the profile. As as silly as that may sound, there are a lot of what they call like naked profiles. So it's
Hmm.
literally it's an active link, an active profile, and then just titles and the year and date and no information. So
So you do
um,
want like a some sort of description or something within the
ideally,
roles, even
yeah,
if it's just
ideally.
short and sweet.
Absolutely. Even if it is like two or three bullet points of relevant work, it goes a lot further than just having it blank and me wondering what you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the more information, the better. If you can closely mirror your resume, then great. If you don't want to clutter that profile with all that information, because it can be a lot, even though, LinkedIn is suited for that type of information to be presented. Um, then that's just preference, right? But I would highly suggest that you do include some type of information. There is also, I'll probably offline, Coralie, I'll send
Mm-hmm.
you a link. I'm just thinking of it now, but I just watched a really cool video about how to optimize your LinkedIn profile. So, really cool link that I can share with you all. But ultimately, it does include information or mention including information about what you do. There's an objectives or a profile section
Yeah,
just
like
above
almost like a
all of that.
summary. Yeah.
Right. So that summary, use that information to give a quick breakdown, a quick like elevator pitch, right? Um, and that can usually include something as simple as, "Hi, I'm Angel. Uh, I'm an I'm a talent acquisition professional with 5+ years of experience working within the gaming industry."
And
And
that's it.
then maybe a closer, right? There's also a really cool feature just above all of your profile information. It looks like a banner
Mm-hmm.
that not many people know it's there, and you can use it for advertising, like for your own advertisement. So if you're a designer or if you're
You can
a
add like a
marketing
little bit
or
of that personality into.
right, right, and personalize your profile. So those type of things I look for, right? So if someone's creative with their profile, if they utilize that banner, that's great. If ideally someone utilizes that objective or that profile feature, um, that's highly suggested as well. Because the end goal for this, for all of this, for resumes, for profiles, for any engagement, is to make an impression,
Yeah,
right?
it's you're kind
And
of selling yourself a little bit.
right, right. And you only have a finite amount of time, right? Like you only have a limited amount of time to make that impression, given that, I mean, recruiters and sourcers can look at hundreds of profiles a week,
How many
period.
on average do you like
Weekly, I'm probably averaging 500 plus. So, and
at least 100 a day?
that's minimum, yeah, minimum. So and that's just like reviewing. There's obviously a few other things that I have to do on a day to day, but yeah, profiles are I'm reviewing probably close to 100 plus a day, period. So it's really important to I don't know if you can kind of scale that in your head on how much time that would take to do, but that takes a lot of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, um, because of that, I'm one of those. I'll look at maybe certain keywords or certain things that stand out um, that catch my eye, and then I'll reach out to that candidate. We can actually talk on that a bit too a little later,
Yeah.
but because I'd like to include that in our resume breakdown too, because it kind of aligns with LinkedIn and what you should include. Um,
But yeah.
so yeah,
All right.
cool. So I'm gonna move forward here. So probably what all of you came here for, right? Resume
All the
101.
secrets. They want to know all the
Right,
secrets.
right. So I wanted to kind of break down what our world looks like, just so you have an expectation or kind of an idea of what we're dealing with, in hopes of maybe figuring out a way that would work for you to communicate your information best, right? So it's not to you know brag or boast on what we're doing. It's more of just to enlighten people that may not be in that industry, right? So in regards to resumes though, I think all in all, one of the biggest things to keep in mind is recruiters are scanning through these resumes. As much as I would love to admit that I go through the entire resume in first sittings, I don't. It's honestly, it's very time consuming when you're going through 100 plus profiles. So what I'd like to do is just give a breakdown of what can catch the attention of these recruiters and these sourcers that could potentially, if not interview you or introduce you to people that could potentially, take you to your next career. So resume 101. First thing is to highlight relevant work, right? I think you and I, Corley, we kind of discussed how it's very easy for people to, when writing up a resume, to kind of mirror a job description almost,
Mm-hmm.
opposed to what their experience is, right? So I think a really good note it would be, with relevant experience, make it personable, right? But make it professional.
Mm-hmm.
But keep it relevant. And what I mean by relevant is, don't write down the breakdown of your resume. So usually when I think of a resume, the breakdown is your name, right? Initially, you have your header, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
your name, your email address, your contact information. Um, then ideally an objective part or a profile where you can do that whole summary thing that we mentioned,
And it
similar
can
to
mirror,
LinkedIn.
yeah, it can mirror what you have on LinkedIn, especially I would imagine you would want to cater that just a little bit based on the role that you're applying for, so that,
Abs-
if
Absolutely, yeah.
if you're applying for a back-end engineering job on one resume, and then another application would be like maybe server side or front end or something else, but it's still an
Right.
engineering job, like make sure maybe that summary is finely tuned for each role.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in general, I know it can sound very tedious because it is, right?
Hmm.
But when you're searching for a job, when you're really searching for a career, um, there might be some effort to put into, right? If you want that dream job, you have to cater your resume to fill that requirement, right? So as silly as it may sound, it really helps when presenting over to a recruiter or a sourcer that's seeing similar profiles, right? How do you stand out? Um, so the breakdown, the objective, and then you have your experience. So if you worked at Activision or if you worked at Scopely, right? Like you have the most relevant, most recent experience, ideally with the date and location included, right? And then maybe 4 to 5 bullet points of a breakdown, right? And within those experiences, ideally you're keeping to the relevant work. Um, and to preface that, or to kind of going deeper on what those expectations might look like for relevant work, think of anything that you do on a day-to-day basis and not necessarily something that sounds generic as like
Like if I were UX, like creating
if you
wireframes,
right, if you were
because
UX creating wireframes or
that's
creating
literally what I do
prototypes.
all day.
Right. So you're not standing out. Like it's literally okay. So I'm reading a job
I'm
description
doing a
now. I
thing.
don't know what this person does personally, right?
Hmm.
And if it does match the resume or the requirements, then more than likely I'll reach out still. But it makes it easier. It makes it more exciting for the recruiter also to see a breakdown of what you're actually doing. So if you're implementing wireframes or you're creating prototypes, what does that look like? You
Hmm.
know what I mean? On a day to day, what are you doing? What projects are you working on? How is that impacting your job and company, right? If there's statistics that you help the company, progress in. So let's just say, um, Corley, UX, right? So 65% increase in user. Um,
Conversion to paid.
okay, boom. Include that in your resume, right? Include stats, include measurable goals, opposed to just a breakdown of what a job description may sound like, or you may think might want to be seen,
Hmm.
right? We want to see relevant work,
Yep.
right? It's great to know that you're within the industry, within that particular position, but what do you do within that position,
Yep.
right?
And
So
how have you kind of like positively impacted your own team and the project
yeah.
as a whole? Like, again, if we are talking about like programming, did you put together a system that kind of
Mhm.
just made frame rate
Right.
just be amazing, and like the game no longer crashes, or You
Right.
manage to
Resolved bugs.
optimize
If you're in UA, resolved bugs.
that.
That
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Or even like pipeline process pipeline is another one as well. Like, if you are in QA, taking that
Mhm.
example, instead of just kind of like navigating in the dark and trying to like find bugs that you can't really find, like maybe you
Mhm.
sat down with the team, put together a QA process that let you identify bugs and cross check with other teams to make sure that things were being followed through,
Right.
rather than just
Right.
saying, hey, this exists and that's it, and then having that kind of like
Right.
fall through the
Yeah.
void.
No, for sure, and it's important. I think I've been guilty of it. I think we all have been guilty of just being so humble, just trying to be having humility as much as possible, right? Not trying to brag, not trying to, you know,
And
look super fancy, but that's not the case. Like technically, you're supposed to brag a little bit at this point, but we
a
want to
little
see
bit.
that. We want to see
And
what you just slightly,
and
So,
I've been there,
um,
like before. So for my resume, I actually had to sit down with multiple people, including recruiters, including a career coach, because every
mhm,
time I wrote my resume when I was starting out, everything I wrote down was like, well, yeah, like it's just what I do. I don't know how else to write it. And then people,
right,
someone actually had to sit down with me and like, okay, let's talk about this role. What were all the things that you did? And I would go
right,
down the list. Well, I did this, I did that, I designed this thing that like increased our production by like 200% or something like that, or by however many hours. And they were like, whoa, 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 why isn't that on your resume? I'm like,
right,
because
right.
it's my job. Like I don't know how
Yeah.
else to describe it. Like it's just something I had to do. But
Yeah,
you have to like reframe your mind a little bit, and how you approach your own tasks in a way that
yeah,
highlights your achievements. And that's
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
difficult sometimes.
No, very difficult. I mean, I've been guilty of it for years, So, but just being on this end now, just being exposed to really well-written resumes, we start to get an understanding of what works, right?
Hmm.
So this is the first point. So I'm going to move on because I feel
Yeah.
like we could talk about
Yeah,
this
sorry.
for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, but and this kind of like correlates, this kind of piggybacks on that. So focus. When I say what I mean by focus on the top of your resume, the most relevant work needs to be on top,
Hmm.
right? So within these bullet points or breakdowns of your job descriptions, keep keep the most interesting topics and successes to the top of that paragraph. As rudimentary as that may sound, it's very important, right? So if I'm going through someone's resume and they've worked at Scopely and then they've transitioned to Riot, and at Scopely the first three bullet points, it has percentages and stats and successes, and then on Riot the first three points I would want to see the same thing, is
Hmm.
my point. So
Consistency.
try and keep a consistency on relevant work and put it at the very top of these breakdowns, so we don't have to go through, it's just easier to read,
Hmm.
right? And we know exactly what you can offer, right? So again, it's just end goal is really to make an impression, right? And it's these are little tips and tricks that stand out, right? So these relevant works and keeping your information focused on the top of your resume is ideal. So um, that just so showing your worth in numbers is literally just the stats and percentages that I mentioned, right? So if Corley saw an increase in user engagement, 63%, include that, and
Yeah.
over a 3-month process or something, right?
Yeah,
So
and
these stats.
sometimes, and I have something like that on my resume where we had increased a conversion to paid on a product that we were working on because of these designs that I put together and user tested at the same time. So that's letting you know two different things, or
Mm,
three different things: how successful those designs were, and the fact that we actually had to user test, and I led that user testing.
mhm.
So that right there lets you know that I'm cross functional as well.
Right, right. It stands out because a lot of people forget to, if not forget, they don't think it's necessary,
Hmm.
which makes sense, right? Who wants to read numbers, right? But it helps. It helps when, especially if it's a position that could potentially see a requirement for numbers being like analytics or an
The
increase
PM.
right, exactly, exactly.
Yep.
Um, oh, very important. So use so relevant keywords within a um a resume. I'm pretty sure people at this point are familiar with what a search engine SEO is, or search engine optimization. It's these are keywords that are going to appear in a search, right? So um, this is specifically important when you're applying to a position, right? If we're using an ATS or an AWS, as Corley mentioned to me yesterday, Activision isn't on one of those, but we're more of an ATS CRM. Um, but these systems can potentially be a search engine as well. So if we have a few thousand applicants within a couple of weeks applying, and I need to search for a project manager or a UX designer, I can go into these CRMs and ATS systems or account tracking systems, or um, and find these potential candidates, right? So it's important to have keywords within your resume that are going to be relevant to your position. So again, to use Corley's profession as an
I'm the guinea
example,
pig.
right? UX is known for the prototyping and the
Hmm.
mock-ups and the wireframing. So these are keywords. Even though I said it, I need to pick. It may sound I'm contradicting myself, but these keywords need to be present in a way where it doesn't sound like a generic job description.
Hmm.
So keywords can be included as a really quick mention within the bullet points, but then also a skill set. So
Yep.
at the bottom of your resume, you'll have your skills, your technologies, and you can include these keywords just so they're present and they can be hopefully utilized within a search,
Yeah.
right?
Like my
So
resume,
very,
I
very
believe.
important.
My resume, I believe, does that. Like at the very on the bottom corner, left
That's how I
corner.
found
Like
you.
yeah, I just have like all of them down there, and
Right.
and just to give our viewers like an idea of how interesting these word search systems work.
Hmm.
So one of my first jobs when I moved to San Francisco was for a GIS tool. And this
Oh
is
yeah.
a tool for surveyors to kind of like go out
Mhm.
in the field and plot down land and whatnot. And that was like what 4 years ago, something like that. And I still get recruiters contacting me about GIS and
Mhm.
designing for GIS. I'm like, no, like, and it's because I still have that in my LinkedIn and in my resume, and whenever they do word searches, my resume gets pulled up and pulled in into that.
Yeah.
So just yeah, just to give people an idea.
Yeah. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful resource to utilize, especially someone like myself that I'm literally searching for people on a day to day and using keywords,
Yep.
right? I'm using Boolean searches. I'm on Google. I'm doing X-ray searches. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm searching for people there. So if you're within a position and don't have a specific keyword or talent or requirement
Mm-hmm.
within your profile or resume, you're going to be overlooked,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to, not downgrading your experience at all. It's just we can't find you,
Yep.
right? So it's very important, super
And
important to
and
be mindful of that.
and giving you another example on this as well, I was actually not really mentoring. I was helping somebody with a job that they wanted to apply for within Niantic.
Mhm.
And they sent me their resume, they sent me their portfolio, and I looked through it. And the first thing I asked was like, okay, so you want to work here? Do you have any sort of like relevant experience, either with AR, VR, XR, whatever, or games? Like one or the
Mhm.
other, because while I can kind of, show your work, I don't know if you're going to meet the requirements that they're looking for just because of that. And then they told me like, oh yeah, like the first this job, it was a physical and digital mixed space kind of thing, and I'm like, well, why isn't that in your resume?
Mhm.
Like, if you are
Yeah.
applying for this role or for this company specifically, you have to call that out. So again, it comes back to like making sure that, when you are setting up your resume, you are fine tuning it for the different jobs that you're trying to apply for. If you did work on VR and it's a company that does VR, AR, whatever, mention that somewhere.
Yeah, it's important. I,
Yeah.
I I don't know if it's kind of it could potentially be a strategy that people are doing to to kind of get on the phone
Mhm.
with companies, which is clever, right? Just thinking about it now, like, oh, that's pretty clever. But it also puts you in risk of being overlooked,
Yeah.
right? So I think just to get as much information as possible in front of someone that's probably going to look at your profile initially for maybe a few seconds, sadly to say, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So um but yeah, keywords are very important. So last but not least, please check your format. Please check your format on your resume, please. This includes spell checking. This includes active links, right? So if,
Mm-hmm.
if you have a link to a profile,
Exactly.
first and foremost, please make sure that that link isn't broken, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've seen on more than one occasion hiring managers pass on someone because they can't access their link, right? Um, Very rare actually to come and think about it, but it's happened, right? So again, just to make sure that we're giving recruiters and HR teams enough information to go off of. Make sure that these profile links are active. Make sure that they're highlighted in blue so we know it's a link, right? Um, Also, any anytime you're converting a type of file to another type of program, test it, send it to someone just to make sure that the format stays within what you're thinking it should look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there have been times where even me, and this I say this as a personal experience, I put together my own resume and then I would send it to someone and realize somehow my name dropped to the bottom,
It
and
just reshuffled
now that
everything.
yeah, and I'm like they're like, who is this? Like, my name's at the top. No, it's not. Oh, so it's just a format thing. So just as a precaution, especially if you're like converting files to
Mm-hmm.
different types of programs, let's just check that format.
So,
So.
on that formatting question, I would
Mhm.
ask, typically what do recruiters and talent sourcers prefer a resume be sent as?
Really good question.
Yeah.
um, yeah, really good question. I would highly suggest that you have both Word and PDF. Because depending on the system, if you're dealing with someone in-house, then PDFs are probably more acceptable than if you're working through an agency. And I'm mentioning that because I've worked on both the agency side and in-house working directly with the company. So just as precaution, just have both, right? And it's Microsoft Office makes it pretty easy. So if you have a Word document, you can easily convert it into PDF. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just having two copies. Um, if you're comfortable with sending Word, great. If you're not comfortable with having someone being able to edit your stuff, I get it. Send a
Mm-hmm.
PDF. So it really depends on the industry. It's case by case, right? And depends on the position itself too. I know for a fact designers love PDF because they could play
Mm-hmm.
around with it a little more, right?
I do
So yep,
it.
yep. So that's fine. That's fine. It's really a case by case. It depends on the position and who you're reaching out to. So, but I would highly suggest that you have both.
Okay.
And because it's so easy to have both, right? So it's literally just a couple clicks and save, right? So
All right.
cool. Alrighty. Cool. So portfolios. Now this is kind of like a case by case, and maybe me and Corley can kind of go back and forth a bit. But
Yeah.
in general, like what we're looking for in portfolios is your best, most recent work, and it really depends on whether or not you have a portfolio, right? So um, if you're a designer, UX designer, if you're an engineer, engineers usually do more like, what is it, GitHub? Excuse me, I'm not a technical recruiter, but
I
you
think
know,
so. Like, I think
yeah,
because they just want to see your work. They want to see what
the
your coding
progression.
looks like, and
Mm,
maybe the actual game itself and snippets
right,
of that code. My understanding is that GitHub is what they look for.
right. Which I'm familiar with it. Because it's not that's not within my discipline. I don't use it
Hmm.
pretty frequently. But if you're within engineering, then I would highly suggest GitHub, right? Um, but keeping your best work the most recent. The most recent on your portfolio. And I would say include your range too. So again, it says designer here, so you should show print and digital. I can go into that, but Corley, right? Like um, examples of mock-ups or prototypes or wireframes on your resume, and then the end result, like that, all of this shows range, right?
Hmm.
Shows exactly what you can do. It shows exactly what they can expect. So, and obviously, if you're on an NDA, you can't include this on your portfolio.
Yeah.
But if you can, whatever information you can share it, right?
Hmm.
Be as descriptive as possible with your experience. So,
And can I ask like a little bit more about that range? So a
yeah.
lot of times we see, especially like people that are very new in the industry
Mhm.
or just beginning, they'll add, let's say they're a designer or they're an artist, they'll add like other things that they do as well. So maybe,
Like what? Can you give me an example?
so I'll give you my example. When I first
Okay.
started, I had my graphic design work, but
Yep.
then I also had other tabs that were photography and
Sure.
illustration, even though my what I'm applying for is graphic design.
Right.
Would it be better to have those things separated out into different portfolios? Does it matter? Is that something that's okay to have all in one portfolio, but just kind of sectioned off in a way so that it doesn't become confusing? Like,
Yeah. I like when people have a range. And again, I think this is case by case for recruiters as well, right? So it depends on the type of role. But if you're a graphic designer and a photographer and an illustrator, I don't see it to be a problem to include all those, but break them up into tabs or individual links, right? Still part of your portfolio as a whole, but separated, right? Easy to find. So if I'm looking for and I come across this almost every day, um, where I'll come across a portfolio and they'll have their design work and then their illustrator work, right? But they're separated.
mhm.
So I know exactly what I'm looking for, so I'm going directly to their design work, and then see what, and then just take it from there, really. So
Okay.
I don't find it to be an issue to have it all inclusive. Um, I would say though, divide it in some way though. Don't have it all in one profile, or kind of like they're separate. I've seen profiles where there's like individual windows that you could click on
Hmm.
that have active links, and it'll send you to that actual project. That can be confusing if they're kind of jumbled in together,
Yeah.
because now I'm looking at a design project, and then the next one I'm looking at an illustrator project, and I'm like, what just happened here?
Yeah.
So
I thought this
um,
person was a designer and now I'm seeing
yeah.
something else.
Well, and obviously I could go back and see, what's designing and then what's illustrating, and that's not an issue. But it's just to streamline the process, make it easier on the hiring team. You can separate them, or title them in a way that is easily noticeable that it's not a design; it's a illustrator
Okay.
project. So we touched on this a bit, but it's I don't know, again, if this is like a strategic thing where people don't include portfolios on their resumes. I would highly suggest that you include a portfolio if that is something that's required from your position. So if you're a designer, if you're an engineer, if you're a UX designer, UI designer, even marketing people, if they have
I would
if they have a
say
portfolio, right? So
I would say maybe even engineers as well. I think this
yeah,
is like just a good rule of thumb for everybody, honestly.
right, right.
Unless you
In
don't have a
general,
portfolio, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important. I don't know if it's a strategy,
Hmm.
but it's I mean, to have that information readily available to see your work, it only excites me when I see good work. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, okay, cool. So
I mean,
I would highly suggest it. Yeah.
and it makes your job easier as well. Like you don't have to go looking for extra information.
But yeah, that and it also streamlines the hiring process as a whole, right? So
Hmm.
now I have to wait for you to send me a portfolio so I can send your information over to the hiring manager.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's just the kind of just to streamline the process to make it easier. Once I talk to you, I have all the information I need. I send it over. I can get a response within an hour and have
Hmm.
a phone interview set up within the next day. So why not just streamline that process, right?
Hmm.
Have everything ready. So,
and and I can talk a little bit from the hiring manager side as well.
mhm.
If you include,
Please,
yeah, if you include a
please.
portfolio
Mhm.
that is smartphone compatible, in the sense that like I can see your entire portfolio from my phone or on a website because it dynamically changes to meet the aspect ratios and everything. That
Responsive design, right?
exactly. That would be
Mhm.
perfect because majority of the time people are looking at these portfolios on their smartphone.
Yes,
So,
yes. Yeah, and that's a good point too. If you have a portfolio that offers like a responsive design
mhm.
option, like I know, like what's it?
Squarespace has like
Yeah,
a bunch of
they offer that, right? Where they
yeah.
kind of do both. Yeah. So if you can utilize that, highly suggest it as well because yeah, Corley's right. People are checking out a lot of information on their phones.
Hmm.
You know, I have my email going to my phone, so you know, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, So I mentioned this already, but I'll touch on it again. When including your portfolio on the resume, again, make sure that it's accessible. If there's a password that's needed, include that password. Share it with the audience. Obviously, if you don't want anyone just going to your portfolio, I get it. But
Hmm.
if you see someone that's reaching out, or if if you've noticed that they've um, viewed your profile on LinkedIn, hopefully people are logging in and creating one right now.
Hmm.
Um, I You can always just send them a quick message. Hey, if you're interested in seeing my portfolio, here's the link and here's the password.
Hmm.
So just in case there's a password there, because I know that happens. So cool. So the recruitment process. So what does that look like? I think I mentioned Corley. I think we could just kind of like round robin this thing,
Yeah, a little bit.
this process. So all in all, what happens again? I think I touched on this with recruiters and sourcers. Recruiters are going to be the people that are seeing applicants, right? They're going to see the pool of applicants coming in, uh, whether it be from a job board or whether it be from our site directly or LinkedIn. LinkedIn is another big source, huge source um, of our applicants. Excuse me. So they're going to probably be the first group of people that are going to see your information if you apply, right? Um, Now, if I'm on the case, then I'm reaching out to you directly. Um, and that avoids that whole pool situation, right? So
Hmm.
that's why it's important to have a profile. So just in case someone's looking for a profile that fits your experience, they'll reach out,
Yeah,
right?
you're already
And you're
over that
easily
first hurdle.
accessible. Yep. So but once the recruiter sees the applicants, then they'll decide who fits best for the role, and then potentially reach out directly, set up calls. Initial phone screen is usually the case. And then if there's a fit, if they feel that there's a fit for for that particular position, then they'll forward the information over to the hiring manager, and then we get the wheels moving for the actual hiring process with the team. That'll know the day-to-day processes. Um, so as talent acquisition, we're leaned on to find these people, find the closest fit for these roles. But the hiring managers like Coralie, she'll know exactly what that day to day looks like. So once you get to that stage, she'll be able to answer the day to day questions.
Hmm. And
That makes
ask the
sense,
day-to-day questions as well.
right? Right,
Yeah.
right. Um, And then essentially it really depends case by case what that hiring process looks like. It depends on the hiring manager, depends on their schedule, depends on the candidate's schedule as well. But all in all, I usually see a process taking anywhere between 3 to 5 interviews, average maybe.
And this
Um,
varies from company to company as well.
Varies company. Yeah, please take this with a grain of salt. This is all subjective. This is my experience,
Hmm.
right? So, what I've seen is maybe 3 to 5 rounds. But again, it depends on who you're speaking with and what type of role it is, right?
Yep.
So if it's like a senior manager, then maybe 2 to 3 rounds. If it's like a senior director level,
More.
probably more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and then once you get through all those rounds, once you get through that panel, the panel of people that you're speaking with, um, then they'll coordinate with us to let us know who they're moving forward with, and then we'll move forward with the hiring process. That includes offer negotiations and things of that nature, right? So, any questions, Coralie?
Quite a few.
Let
um,
Let's go. I'm ready.
so, typically, what kind of questions could they expect on the recruiting side? Because as a hiring manager, I'm asking very, very
Mhm.
different questions of the people I would be interviewing with. But for you, typically, like, and especially since you guys are the first round, you are
Yeah.
the first phone call, just kind of like vetting this person,
Mhm.
and then the information get passed over, and sometimes in between you'll like check in with us.
Right.
But typically, what kind of questions can you expect?
Um, it's a good question. So the recruiter slash sourcer should be on the same page as the hiring manager, at least in regards to like a basic understanding of what the day to day looks like or what the expectations of the role are. So just based on a 20-minute conversation that I may have with you as a hiring manager to get an understanding of what your expectations are, based on that short conversation is what I'm going to base my questions on, right? So um, years of experience, if there's a requirement for that, if there's a requirement for certain technologies, and to what scale, right? What type of projects do you want this person to have experience with? um, Sometimes what type of industry is the person coming from, right? So within gaming, it is a niche opportunity where a lot of in-game work, right, requires in-game experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that could potentially be a requirement if you're applying for an engineering role within gaming,
Yep.
right? So um
You
so
need to
those are
know.
typical.
Oh, sorry. You, for example, like you need to know Unity or some sort of Unreal or some other,
Unreal, yeah.
which
Hmm.
someone from another industry that maybe like apps or web or some other platform wouldn't get that experience. You
Right,
know.
right. Like, is Maya a requirement, right?
Mm-hmm.
If not, cool, then what are we using? So it's my questions are being based on what was disclosed to me, and hopefully I was able to pull enough information from you, from the initial round, right? But there have been cases where we would have to go back because for whatever reason we're just not meeting the mark, right? So then we'll have a second conversation. Corley, I'm not hitting the target, so what am I missing? This is what I have, right? And then we'll talk about it, and then we'll readjust.
Okay.
So those are the type of questions, and that's, excuse me, that's a case by case as well. It depends on the position.
And and I know this is a question that a lot of people have. At
Okay.
what point do people start talking about salary and salary expectations?
I talk to people the first time I talk to them. So but there's a reason why, right? So, and I know it can be iffy I know how uncomfortable it is to talk about money, right? I know it, but yeah,
I
me too.
hate it. I hate
Me
it.
too. Me too. But I think we have to let's. I'm going to step back and try and see if I can paint a picture in hopes of people trying to understand what it looks like on our end. Um, if we have a budget and we have expectations for a role, right? Whether whatever that means, skill sets, technologies. budget plays a part too. So if I'm talking to someone and they're really talented, I fear that I may not be meeting their budget, right? So I think it's just to have full transparency moving forward. It's just to, and this is just my experience and how I conduct, right? And this is
Mm.
it's different for sourcers because, you know, we have to present that information on a sourcing standpoint because if you're not applying, these are candidates, and I should note because I didn't mention, but a lot of the candidates that I'm reaching out to are passive, which means they're not currently looking, but they are open to conversation, right?
Yep.
So what does that mean? What are they looking for? What are the expectations? So it's different on my end, right? As a recruiter, there might be a salary that's included in the job description. So that happens uh, a lot of times actually, but in that case, the applicant already knows what the expectations are. So we're hoping that you're within that range, right? But that's a case by case, to be honest with you, Coralie. If I'm reaching out to you, I'm asking though.
Yeah.
So that's just me in my position. But I don't find it odd to discuss it initially, as awkward as it may be. And also too, I think it's important to know what your worth is as well,
Hmm.
because if you don't know your worth, man, someone else is going to put a price tag on it. So
So,
it's
so
it's important.
I think that's a good conversation and kind of discuss really quick. Like a
Hmm.
lot of people, again, either they're starting out or maybe
Hmm.
they're like a little bit early in their career or maybe not. They've been at an
Hmm.
indie studio for a very long time doing their own projects. But they live in other places where maybe the salary expectations are different
Yeah.
from other cities, other states, etc., or
Yep.
other countries. What are good
Hmm.
resources for people to start actually researching how much they're worth? Period.
You know what? As silly as this may sound, I mean, Google. It's one of those things where, like, I think it's as easy as doing your research on living costs, because I know for a fact it is more expensive to live in LA than it is in San Juan, right? So, um, it's just living costs are so different and so drastic, right? So I
Yep.
think it's when transitioning from any state, from any country, I think it's important to have an understanding of what that living expense is going to look like and what would work for you budget wise. Like
Hmm.
what is your budget currently? What's the debt that you have? What responsibilities do you need to maintain, right? So it's it's a personal thing, but I think searching living expenses, the average within a certain area, would go a very long way. And then also research the average salary compensation for positions that you're applying to as well, right?
So,
And
like,
within that city. So let's
yeah.
say I'm applying for a graphic designer role or an engineer, right? Let's just say I'm applying for an engineer role. What is, wow, that's so broad. Let me do this design side because I know that better. Let me say I'm applying for a level design role within gaming,
Hmm.
right? So what does that mean for salary standpoint? What does that mean within LA? What is
Hmm.
the average compensation for that,
Is
for
it a
salary
AAA
compensation?
company? Is it a mobile
Is it
company? Is it an
exactly
indie studio? is it
right? Right.
is it a
There's a lot of
startup?
variables. A lot of variables. So there might be some legwork, some
Hmm.
research to be done, but all in all, I think first and foremost what the living cost is going to look like, and
Hmm.
then you can gauge that and balance that with your current budget, and then also see after that, see what the average salary looks like, so you can have expectations when applying for roles within a certain area, within a region, right?
Yeah.
So
I think one tool that I use a lot to just kind of like understand my worth and everything has been Glassdoor.
mm. Oh yeah, absolutely. Glassdoor is very
And
very useful,
and I'm going to go
very useful.
ahead, just in case others have never used it before, I'm going to go ahead and write it in the comments.
Hmm.
So Glassdoor is kind of like LinkedIn in some similar ways in that, yes, there's job postings and everything, but you can actually leave reviews for other companies there, and you can also see salaries of different positions, people that
Yep.
either used to work there or currently work in those companies. This is all user generated, so these are employees putting in this information, or supposed to be at least.
Right.
And you can get like a really really good vibe of what that company's culture or just generally what that company is like from an employee standpoint. It's
Yeah.
something that I leverage a lot when I am looking at any company,
Absolutely.
honestly.
Yeah, I think they've also leveraged themselves to a point where if you literally just Google what the salary expectation in a certain region is, Glassdoor would probably be one of the first results
Yep.
within that first page. So they've leveraged themselves to a point where they're a resource for sure.
Yep.
So
Um, and I'm going to read. Let me see. So someone just left a comment like, it's tailoring your resume towards the company as
Mhm.
well will probably help you out. Yeah, like yes, tailor your resume. We didn't talk about this cover letter.
Yeah.
We had a For everyone's reference, we had a whole discussion about cover letters yesterday. There are some feelings about cover letters, but please go ahead.
So please allow me to preface this with this is subjective. This is just my personal opinion. Um, I I really don't care if you have a cover letter. But with that being said, though, I think what I would love to see if you feel inclined to introduce yourself, which is very important, include it in that objectives or profile part of your resume. You
Mm-hmm.
can literally just keep it short and sweet. Um, Cover letters are great. I'm not saying anything bad about it. I just personally go straight to the resume, right? So I want to see what you do, and then I can go back and see what you're about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then take it from there. Um, Not to discourage you from writing a cover letter if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm starting to see less and less need from it from different industries, and people just looking for portfolios and resumes. So, but if you're passionate about writing a cover letter, please do. You know, um, I would suggest a quick little, blurb right at the objective portion of your
Yeah,
resume.
and that's kind of
So,
what I do. Like if you look, I used to do cover letters until I realized whenever I was applying for a job, I would write a completely new cover letter, and it ended up being like 50 different cover letters. It got very, very tedious very quick.
and
Um,
cumbersome.
yeah, no, it's as a hiring manager, if you have a cover letter, I'll look through it very quickly, but I won't base my decision on that cover letter. Really, I'm going to base my decision on your portfolio. And
Hmm.
at least as a UX designer or someone who looks at other game designers or UI artists or anything related to the jobs that I would be helping hire for, I'm
Hmm.
always looking at your portfolio, your resume, and within your portfolio, I can always see a little bit of who you are in there. So it's okay if you don't have a cover letter,
Hmm.
honestly. Like at least on my end, like it's no like it's
Yeah.
fine.
And again, yeah, and just to piggyback on that, it depends on the industry,
Hmm.
right?
It really
It
does.
depends on the
The
who you're
department.
applying to, where you're applying to, right? I know it can be a regional thing too. I know that I have family in HR on the East Coast of the states,
Hmm.
and cover letters are still a thing,
Yep.
right? So it depends. It really depends. So that's why gauge your audience. If they ask for one, cool, you have one prepared. If they
Hmm.
don't, cool.
Yep.
So um
And then we did get a question from our community yesterday,
okay.
and it's kind of a tough question, but
Oh boy.
I hope. So, what can we do in Puerto Rico to help us really showcase the talent the island has for recruiters to consider us a viable source?
Oh
And I want to kind of give a little bit of context to this question. It's a very deep question.
yeah, it's
So,
a good question.
yeah. So in Puerto Rico, at least when I was still on the island, there wasn't any game industry whatsoever. I
Hmm.
left the island, and now there's finally a budding community. It's there. There's departments and universities that now are teaching you about game design and game development and programming, art, all these things. So we're starting to see the talent is rising on the island,
Hmm.
but actual studios are very, very, very few on the island. So most people are either working on their own games aside from their day job, which might be something different, or they're working
Hmm.
outsource or freelance, or they simply haven't been able to get a foot in the door because
Right.
of the location. So, yeah, like what can we do to really like show that, hey, there's a lot of talent over here and like really amazing and like hardworking people.
Yeah. Um, that's a good point. That's a really good point. I would say that we would have to figure out a way to, I mean, be present. If you're not on LinkedIn, I mean, we had a discussion yesterday, Coralie, in regards to LinkedIn, and the question about it being used, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge tool. So highly suggest that, I mean, that could be the starting point. This is a really deep question, by the way.
I
So this
know.
is this is a good one. Um, but having a presence online and getting in front of people, being accessible is probably the starting point that we need to get at, right? So um, having that presence online, and when you're on LinkedIn, remember that you can post stuff that includes your work, even if it is something like a personal project. So if you have a passion project revolving around Puerto Rico, post it on LinkedIn. You know what I mean? That way you can get a presence going, and get attention towards the island. I mean, I think in general we just need to, um, if we're not already present on LinkedIn, figure out a way to be more present, I guess. Start reaching out, maybe building some communities via LinkedIn as well.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a good, that might be a really good option. Um, yeah, that's it's a really deep question,
Yeah,
but
I
I
know.
think, all in all, starting point is to create a presence, right? Start reaching out to people within the industry on platforms that are being utilized in a huge scale, i.e., LinkedIn, right? So I think that would be the starting point, really.
And I kind of you mentioned something that reminded me of a conversation we had yesterday.
Hmm.
Is it okay for us to reach out to recruiters, and what does that look like, or what would be, I guess, the proper etiquette to reach
Sure.
via LinkedIn or via other platforms as well? Like we want to show ourselves, we want to say, hey, we're here, you know.
Yeah.
So how does that reach out look like? Outreach. There we go.
Gotcha. So just to answer your question, is it okay to reach out to a recruiter or a sourcer or someone within HR? Absolutely. That's why they're on LinkedIn, right? So um, I know that me coming from a Latinx family myself, right? It's just be humble, don't bother anybody, do your thing, worry about yourself, So I guess it's like just a cultural thing,
Yeah.
that you don't want to burden anybody. But the fact of the matter is, being in the industry, I want somebody to reach out to me. It makes my job easier, So like, oh, cool. So there's an engineer that that could be a good fit for this role. Um, I would say if you're gonna reach out to someone, be as descriptive as possible on what your intentions are, right? So if you're going to reach out to me or reach out to a recruiter, let them know, hey, listen, I am a so and so within this field, and I have A, B, and C experience. Keep it short too. I say A, B, and C, but A and B ideally. But I've noticed that you have this role open. I'm interested, right?
Mm-hmm.
Highly suggest, if you've come across a position, a specific position on our career sites, that you take that link and include it, right? So in your message, it should be a quick intro of who you are, what you do, and if there's a job posting, include that link and then your resume, right? So that way we have all the information we need. We can look at your information. We can look at the job description, see if it's a match, and then move forward. If not, I mean, there's always that network opportunity. You know, you
Mm-hmm.
can network. You can network with these people and play the long game, right? I have a colleague that connected with someone 3 years ago, right, and he got a job 2 years ago. So it took 2 years, or excuse me, 1 year ago. So it took 2 years for him, you know, to get recruited. And I know we don't want to ever play the long game. We want to get in there as soon as possible, but networking is important too. You never know when that connection's going to be valuable to you, right?
Exactly.
So even if it is just an outreach or a connect, if you just connect with somebody on LinkedIn, send them a quick thank you. Hey, thank
Mm-hmm.
you for connecting. Hopefully we can connect soon. I'll keep an eye on positions. Love your company. Boom. You know what I mean? So yeah.
And with that, where can they reach out to you?
Ah, I got you. I think I did. We add that to the slide. We added it to the slide, right?
Yes, we did.
Boom. Yeah. So, if there's any questions, right? Ideally, I mean, I would love to see if there is a lack of presence on LinkedIn. I would love to see people starting setting up profiles. I can be your first connect, right? Reach out to me, and if there's any questions, I mean, you can also email me. That's my direct email at activision.com. And if you have any questions, even if you just want to pick my brain about something that kind of we didn't talk about or I didn't discuss or I ran through very quickly because I tend to talk really fast. That's the north. That's the north. The East Coast in me, you know. Um, but if there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You're not going to offend me. I would prefer it. Like this is the whole reason why I did this. I was hoping to connect with some people and help them. You know, so again, reach out to me via email or if you're on LinkedIn, connect connect with me on LinkedIn. I hear a dog. Is there
I
a
am.
dog in the background?
I'm sorry. Okay, so give me a second. Bring her here. So during this whole every single speaker series, there's always like a little growl or someone crying or someone. So this is my dog, everybody. She is special guest without her realizing she is. But yes,
Special appearance.
yeah.
That's
Her name
funny.
is Ripley, and she just saw
Ripley.
and she just saw some dogs outside, and that's why she made all that noise. She's a tiny little thing, 3.5 pounds. Um,
Nice.
but thank you so
Very
much.
nice.
Let me hold on. No, thank you so much. I'm gonna give people maybe like about 5 minutes in case they want to ask any other questions.
Please. Yeah.
In
I have
the
time. I'm here.
Yeah, in the meantime, I don't know. Let's see. What's been your favorite experience so far in the game industry?
Are you asking the
Yeah,
people
no,
listening or
I'm
me?
asking you.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I've been a gamer since I was 5, and it wasn't until I moved to LA that I realized that was a possibility to work in, like you just don't think about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, okay, I love that product. I love engaging with the product itself and the games but when I came to LA, I started networking with people and I realized that this is actually a career. I was like, well, this is crazy. Right. So just being in the gaming industry, it's a different vibe, right? The
Yeah,
industry is
very
very
different.
different, very different.
It's so
Um,
chill.
so chill, so chill. This is my work clothes. These are my work
Yeah,
clothes,
I mean,
so
Star Trek.
right. Oh, I can't see you still. I still can't see you.
Oh,
Um,
sorry.
but I'll leave that up just in case people
Okay.
want to. But so I think it's just been interesting, right? Just being in a new industry because I come from an agency background as well. Worked with gaming industry for a few years now, but in house for close to a year now. So it's very different, right? Um, and it's just really cool. It's a really cool environment. I enjoy it and all the perks, all the perks and all the free games,
Yep.
So so
Um,
that's always a plus.
so we have a couple, not so much questions, but comments.
Okay.
So Jonathan's saying, I tell my students that recruiters also look to recruit people. Even though you have a strong portfolio, if you are not a team player, you may be overlooked as well.
Mm, yes, yes. I will say though, like being a team player is a soft skill that's hard to reflect on a resume, though, right?
Yeah.
So definitely a really good point. And if someone does lack, team spirit, I guess,
Hmm.
it can reflect negatively in an interview
Yeah.
for sure.
I
Yeah,
th- I
because
think. Oh, sorry. Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I think one way I reflect it in my resume, and again, this is like personal to me, and I know not a lot of people don't have the resources or even the time to do this. But in my case, while I was still in school, I was also doing a lot of volunteer work.
Mm,
And volunteer work, one, shows your passions, two, shows the fact that you're a team player because you don't know anybody when you are
hmm.
volunteering. And it shows your commitment to other people and causes. So if you have things that show your connection to community somewhere like in your background or anything that you've been doing, I would highlight maybe that somewhere in your resume.
Yeah,
But yeah, like that
it
that
could be.
one is it's tough.
Yeah, that's it's soft skills are usually hard to reflect on a resume, right?
Hmm.
And that's where these phone screens and conversations and interviews come into play, right? So you
Yeah.
can gauge on how that person's going to interact with the team. What I will also say is you can add at the bottom of the resume, at the bottom of the body of the resume, underneath your education and skills, why not add interests too, right?
Hmm.
Our industry is a little different where it's not really frowned upon. It's actually interesting, right? Like, okay, so he's passionate about not only video games but painting and photography. So he's artistic,
Hmm.
right? So he's very creative and he's applying for a creative role. Perfect. So it kind of especially if it aligns, if your interests align with your career,
Yep.
add it, add it.
Cross skills.
Even if you're like for me, I'm a photographer. I have photography on my resume even though it has nothing to do with my position, but I've been leaned on, interestingly enough, for some things,
Hmm.
right? So in the past. So
We have another question. I'm starting to learn Unity currently. Is it a good engine to start programming and design in video game? Currently looking forward to using Unreal. I mean, if you are, I'm just going to speak to this one a little bit. If you
mm,
are like looking to work in video games, doesn't matter what role, I would say just kind of poke around in either Unity or Unreal. I mean, again, it depends because every company uses a different engine.
mhm.
Some companies only use Unity, others use Unreal, others use like their own proprietary engine.
Proprietary. Yep.
So it doesn't matter what engine you use as long as you know the programming language.
Mhm.
But definitely, as a UX designer, like I have experience with Unity. I haven't
Yeah.
coded in 4 years. I haven't opened Unity in a little less than that, but I understand the pipeline. And since you are working with so many different other people that are working in that engine, being able to talk the same language is incredibly important. And sorry about that.
Mhm.
Hold on. I have like notifications popping up of like all my calendar stuff and it's like sliding in. So yes, Unity or Unreal, doesn't matter which.
Mhm.
Some experience in that is going to be it's just going to be an advantage to you, period. For you as a recruiter, like how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not usually focused on the in-game, like the engineering side of things, but in regards to design, I have seen Unity being utilized, Unreal being another option, kind of like cross platform. But a lot of depending on where you're going, where you're applying to, as Corley already mentioned, they use a lot of their own proprietary systems
Mm-hmm.
um, that kind of align with a lot of these uh, pipelines that you mentioned within
Yeah,
Unity
there are
and
similarities.
and
Maybe just the
Unreal, right?
programming
So
language is different or something.
mhm.
Instead of C++, it's Lua or something. I don't
Yeah,
know. But
Lua,
yeah, that it's been a while.
goodness, yeah.
But either way, there's always going to be
It's
overlap.
useful.
Yeah.
It's very useful. I think knowing both, it just shows your range, and it'll allow you to transition a lot easier if
Hmm.
they're using a proprietary system.
Felix has another question. Do you recommend doing a lot of projects like making your own video game? So I don't
Do
know.
do 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 I recommend working on your own video game? Is that the question?
Yeah, I think so. Or maybe even like showing that in your portfolio, like working on a lot of different things and showing those things in your portfolio. Me, I would
Sh-
recommend yes.
Yeah, yeah,
if
absolutely.
if not your portfolio, then maybe some sort of social media like an
Hmm.
Instagram or ArtStation
LinkedIn.
or LinkedIn or Twitter, like even some sort of progress. So I have friends who work as character artists for video games, and they have their main portfolio, which if you look them up on Google, that's immediately the first thing that's going to appear. But then they also have
Mm,
their Instagram where they do like side things or upload like personal projects, work in progress personal projects kind of stuff.
mhm.
Obviously nothing work related, but it's a way for me to see what it is that they're continuing to work on, and to even take this further. We had a friend, not specifically video games. He was in the film industry,
Mhm.
and some of you might know him, Guillermo Martinez. Uh, he worked at oh god, the place that does stop motion. That's in Oregon for films. They did Coraline. I forgot the name.
Oh
Leica.
God.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Leica. So
You're welcome.
no, my husband was like mouthing it to me like Leica. I'm like, what?
Ah,
Yeah. So he actually got a job as a storyboard artist there, thanks to his Tumblr. Not even
nice.
like, not even like his,
Tumblr.
yeah, like
What
back.
year was this?
It was a few years ago,
Wow.
and it wasn't that he even like submitted that link either. It was they just happened to
Yeah.
find it, they loved it, and they called him in. So having a presence, like you mentioned, having a
Mhm.
presence online to let people know, hey, I'm here, I
Mhm.
exist, is super important, and
Very.
them being able to see who you are as a person, as a professional, as a person of your trade.
Right. Agreed.
And hold on. I'm trying to create my portfolio, putting together their online presence, but couldn't find a cheap way because I have little to no resources.
Mm.
So, what do you recommend for people who can't actually invest in, their own domain or their own website? I want to say it's okay to
Behance,
leverage.
like Behance is probably. Wait, no, hold
Yeah,
on.
Behance is I think is free. Uh, Behance, ArtStation is definitely one for.
ArtStation for sure. If you're an artist, right?
Mhm.
Definitely ArtStation. Um,
I think
it's a good
websites like Wix have like a free version as well, or do they still
free
do that?
basic templates. Yeah.
Yeah.
Free basic templates. I mean, I think eventually there might be a cost after a certain amount of time. I can't remember. It's been a while.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, Wix is definitely an option too. Um, but again, I mean, depending on depending on what you're using, I think just being present in general. If you don't have if you don't have a link, right, and your resources are minimum, you can always PDF it if that's something like
Worst
if it's an
case, yeah.
art piece. Yeah, you can always PDF it and then send it to people. If it's a reel, then YouTube. You know what I mean?
Or
Like,
I think Vimeo is free.
v- there you go. That was the other one I was
Yeah.
reaching for. Um, but we have resources that are free, right? That you can reach out, just kind of figuring out a workaround. Um, but just as long as you get the information in front of someone, I think that's the most important part. So if you have a portfolio, if you don't have the resources, you can again PDF it or put a reel together, right?
Okay.
Um, take it from there. So
All right. And with that, I think that's it.
Are we good?
I think we're good.
Oh, nice.
Thank you again
Okay.
so much for.
I'm exiting out here.
Yeah, go for it. Thank you again so much for just joining us and telling us about this whole process and helping our community.
Of course, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And again, if anyone's still online, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to either set up a call, even if it's just like an intro. Hello, how's it going? If you have any questions for me, just let me know. Cool.
All right. Well, everyone will update for next week's weekly speaker series. We'll let you know within the next couple of days what that's going to be. Until then, I hope you have a great weekend. I know it's still a day away, but
Let's do it.
yeah.
It's Thursday.
Yes, we're almost there. Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
so much again.